Joining us for the Legislative and Human Resources Committee meeting for Tuesday, June 26th. Do we have any public comment today? All right, seeing no. Oh, yes. Come up, please, to the podium. And can we get your name and address? Thank you.
My name is Lou Chamberlain. I'm a resident of Canton County. I live at 2025 Shadow Cascade Township. I'm also co-chair along with Kate Walters of the First Steps Commission. First of all, I want to thank this committee and the commission as a whole for the thoughtful process and the careful consideration that you're giving to our proposal for an early childhood vision. This is an issue that I've been passionate about for nearly 20 years. When Doug DeVos and Kate Walters called us together to form the First Steps Commission many years ago, the first thing that they did was educate us. We spent the first year just learning, and not, as it turns out, as fast as a 2-year-old. We learned about brain architecture, and that a child learns more the first 3 years of their life than at any other time, and that stress, which can happen in any family, can actually inhibit brain growth. We also learned that by investing in early childhood programming, there is a proven return on that investment, which is derived from less spending on special education, grade repetition, criminal justice, etc. It just makes sense to invest early when interventions can have the most impact, rather than waiting until later when problems arise and the costs are much higher. A child starts behind, stays behind. And conversely, a child who receives support at an early age will become a contributing member of the community and the workforce. So, in my mind, early childhood is also an economic and workforce development issue. An early childhood millage is not only the right thing to do for all of our children, but it's also the smart thing to do for our community as a whole. And I would urge the commission to allow this millage to go forward to the voters for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Any other public comment today? All right, Commissioner Melton.
Good morning. My name is Betsy Melton, and I live at 3560 52nd Street, Kentwood, Michigan. Some of you know me as my commissioner hat, but today I am not wearing that. I am wearing a hat representing 44,500 students, children, who have been identified by this group that has been put together as possible needs for early childhood intervention, and I would like for you to think about them, please. I'm also here representing actually nine special education speech therapist teachers at just one school in Kent County, and we did some research and we figured out that all of them, not just a couple, all of them have identified that in the last few years, let's say few as 3, that they have had 2 at least or more students every year in their special education, early childhood special education, ECSE programs, who probably would not need a special education price tag on their learning or even need to be in a special education class, had they had an early on intervention in their home, helping their parents understand how best to educate their children. The cost just for this one little school savings is over $4,500. $450,000. There we go. $450,000, which is just one small school in Kentwood. So I'm sure that if we commuted that with all of the schools and all of our districts that find themselves at kindergarten age or younger with special needs children, that savings would be even greater. The sponsors of this program show us that this is not a partisan decision. This is very nonpartisan, and it's a good investment in our future. And our are not taking the full package to the voters, but I'm certainly confident that this group will come up with ways to support the .25. Given the critical importance of this to our county and our children, I believe it's important to give the voters the opportunity to vote on this package. Why would we not want to build our future on a very strong foundation? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other public comment today? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 2, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Korndike, support by Commissioner Vonk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we do have a pretty long agenda, I guess, for us today. So we have a couple different performance measurements before us. And Andy, are you here? 5-minute update.
I did practice this.
You time it?
I'm not trying to do it in 5 minutes, but I'll do my best. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy Dahlheimer. I'm the Court Administrator of the 17th Circuit Court here for Kent County. I bring greetings from the Chief Judge, Judge Cusack, as well as all the judges that serve on the circuit bench. Without their hard work, leadership, and a bunch of devoted staff, which I want to introduce you to in a little bit, this report wouldn't be possible. I believe in your packet you have our 2017 performance indicators measures. It's a big packet. I wanted to use this opportunity to share what's happened so far this year, give you a little bit of update. First of all, latest statistics. I mean, what we do over there, pretty much we do civil cases, criminal cases, divorces and domestics. We do delinquency, child abuse, and neglect. You add up all those case types, that's the vast majority of the cases that we handle over there. I'm happy to report that we are ahead of the suggested Supreme Court guidelines in all those case types. And Nick Little, who is here, he runs our case management department. Not only is he the first one to identify when we don't do that, but he keeps track of all these records and makes sure that we're staying in line. Wish Nick well. He tomorrow his children outnumber his parents in his household. So I'm also happy to report that less than 8% of our juvenile delinquents, those kids that we have on probation, are referred for new law violations while they're on probation. And again, the Circuit Court, who kind of on her own came up with an idea to make this a much better process. We've got kiosks now in the waiting room, so people are actually doing things. It's somewhat paperless. It hooks into the legal aid website, legal assistance website, legal aid website, so it kind of guides the petitioners through the process. It's pretty much automated now. We've noticed a pretty large reduction in wait times for the public that are coming to that. As you can imagine, it's not a very fun time for someone to be in the courthouse. Finally, we've had two judges on the bench. They started at the beginning of 2017. We're getting used to them. They're getting used to us. It is a process for everyone to learn everything, and we think that that's been going quite well, actually. I'm going to skip now to the fact that, again, I want to brag on the staff and the judges a little bit. We feel very well prepared to handle the challenges that are coming before us. Like I said, it's a hard-working bench. It's a devoted staff. It's a competent staff that work hard and realize the importance of what they do. I was telling Wayne that we were at a leadership summit last week. I was telling him that when I took over from my predecessor, who'd been here 35 years, I was a bit intimidated. I was sharing that with someone I knew, and he kind of, the person I was talking to said, yeah, but it's Kent County. You got people that are cooperative. You work together. And I found that to be true. The clerk's office, he let me sit with them as I was waiting to get every to present. But yeah, through 5-6 years now of being here, for the most part, it really has demonstrated itself. But I did want to point out a few obstacles and challenges. Most of them have to do with kind of uncertainty, the things that we don't really necessarily have too much control over, things kind of coming from the state. One is our mandated e-filing initiative. Now, we don't really know when this is going to happen. We were told 2018, but they've also said there'll be a 6-month lead time when they come to us to say you're next. Well, 6 months from now, we haven't heard from them yet. 6 months from now is 2019, so we're not really sure when that's going to happen. It's obviously going to be a process that we go through. I think we'll come out on the other end much better, much more efficient. It just makes sense to utilize that technology, but we're still kind of in a holding pattern waiting for what Lansing does. We can't go too far with what we're doing to make sure it works with Lansing. Indigent defense. I just got word that the legislature budgeted, I don't know, 84, 86 million to get this implemented. The first round did not affect circuit court too much, but the next set of standards, if they go through, will affect circuit court much more. One of them is independent from the judiciary. Right now, our judges go through the list to make sure the assignment is random, but who's actually on the list. The judges participate in that, and it's actually in the court's budget, so we'll have to see how that works. We're going to lose 2 more judges at the end of this year, Judge Johnson and Judge Lieber. Very experienced judges, long-serving judges, good judges. They cannot seek re-election due to the age requirement, and so we'll be getting at least 2 new judges next year. The Network 180 budget issues continue to be an issue for us as well. And we refer people to these services. Obviously, the mental health court pursuing longer wait times, things like that for services to get everyone. We know everyone's trying, but that is something that is impacting us. In our juvenile system, we have a few contracts with Network 180 that we're taking on a little bit more of those types of things. And finally, the Raise the Age initiative, juveniles, 18-year-olds. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of more of a county-paid system, the juvenile system, as opposed to the adult, where we just ship people to the Department of Corrections in the state. If that is shifted to us, a lot of discussions right now are just to make sure that it's the appropriate budget is attached to that for the counties to protect our interests. So that is all I have.
All right, any questions for Andy today? Commissioner Korndike?
Thank you, Chair. So Andy, topic that's ongoing all the time is the caseload and number of judges. So where are you right now on that with the chief judge or the new chief judge next year in regards to monitoring that? And what do you think we're going in the next 4 years?
Yeah, if you look at the total cases and total filings, we're
Commissioner Steck?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that issue, Andy, when is the next SCAO analysis of judge calls or number of judges?
Yeah, I believe we just got one, that they just completed one that came out in March or April. I don't think they were recommending any additions. I have to check on that to be sure. And what they did this year, through the month of May, is they did a new judicial time study. And that's where these numbers come from. About 10 years ago, they give judges spreadsheets, and pretty much in 15-minute intervals, they have to say what they're doing, what case they're working on, et cetera. For 2 or 3 weeks, they had to do that. It might have been 4, actually. And through that, it's a statewide thing. Every judge in the state has to do it. At every level of court, they have to do it. The Lansing, actually, the National Center for State Courts, and through that, they decide what the appropriate case weight will be. And then each case type is assigned a weight, and then you kind of look at a 3-year average of how many filings you've had in the case to see, okay, this is how many judges,
Do they make their recommendation every 2 years?
every 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. So also kudos on the work with the mental health court. I'm sure excited about that opportunity and continuing to work on that direction. And I'm a little concerned that you're reporting that there are service delays from community mental health agency. I'm intimately aware of the financial issue, but I would hope that that would not interfere with either the responsive or nature of the response for any of these contracts. So if in fact there are delays, I would like to know that. If that shouldn't happen. Thank you.
Any other questions for Andy today? I just have one, Andy. On page 10, we're talking about adolescent sex offender treatment programs. On the second line, it says juveniles completing an assessment within 56 days. Does this might dovetail into Commissioner Steck's question. Is 56 days kind of the state standard? Can we get them assessment prior to 56 days? Is it a provider issue?
No, it's not a provider issue. The adolescent sex offender treatment program in our county, that we do that. We have our own probation officers
Okay.
that do that. Yeah, the explanation for that could be, again, sometimes kids are placed in detention, it's harder to get to. Sometimes they are, you need to get with parents.
Okay.
Probably trying to take as many kids as possible into that program to make sure they're appropriate. So, sometimes there's a little bit of a waiting period with that. I did notice a few of those, the timeliness of some of those assessments. I think
Okay.
the first assessment was slowed down a little bit throughout. So that was something.
Yeah, I just have concerns because, a lot can happen in 56 days in their own home especially. So just wondered how we determined that metric, and then can we improve it, or do you think there's any room for improvement there, or that's kind of, we're hitting
No,
what we can?
I believe it.
Okay.
I think we beat that number in previous years.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
it could be a little bit of worker turnover or not having as many workers, but that's no one else's issue. That's our issue on that.
Okay. Great. Oh, Commissioner Womack.
Yes, when it comes to criminal case filings, do you know why those are going up or remaining steady instead of going down?
Criminal filings, I believe they were down in, do you have the page? Yeah, in 2016, it was 3,378
Any other questions? Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. All your work. Awesome. All right, moving on to item 4, County Clerk Register of Deeds Performance Measurement Review. Our Clerk Lyons.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me today. I do sit in the seat right next to you every other week, but my name is Lisa Stewis Lyons. I am the Kent County Clerk, Register of Deeds, and I have been in office for the last 18 months almost. Just want to thank the board, the administration, and staff for helping to make these last 18 months as smooth a transition as it could possibly be. That really has been kind of a word to sum up my experience. It's changes and transitions, and it's really been quite an experience and a partnership moving with so many different pieces that fit together to make this government and my office work for the people of Kent County. So I'm very appreciative for that partnership. And I also appreciate the opportunity to share where we have been and where we are going this last year. You will see in this presentation, I'll introduce you to my leadership team. We'll talk briefly about the alignment with board priorities, the key metrics, significant accomplishments of our office, along with key collaborations, potential budget or other issues, and just looking ahead. I'm very blessed to have a team that is really, truly works great together, and they truly have servants' hearts. They come to work every single day prepared. They know what they're doing, from the chiefs that really help me run this office, and all the way down to the front line, those people who are there to serve our constituents day in, day out, with dedication and competence that really does this county justice. I'd like to introduce from my left, Tim Perry, my senior office administrator or assistant. We have Jerry Guzarski, our elections director. I would say he's now one of our senior leadership staff. Again, transition being the key word this last year. Rob McCumber, my chief deputy county clerk. Jerry Shaya, my chief deputy register. And the newly appointed Amy Moylan, our chief deputy county clerk, to round out our leadership team. How we align, our priority alignment with the county, we do provide stable and predictable filing and recording fees. We are good stewards of taxpayer dollars, always trying to be efficient and effective in everything that we do. Our accurate records help keep our public safe, and our citizens, as we collaborate, we work with the citizens and locals to run our elections, and we are continually working to innovate our operations in the Clerk and Register of Deeds office, hoping and striving to be a leader and a pilot among our peers throughout the state. And this all leads to a higher quality of life for our residents. Moving on to key goals and metrics, we'll start with our Register of Deeds office. Our first metric is that we record all documents received within 5 business days with 99.5% accuracy. For 2017, we had 108,430 total documents. 100% of those were recorded within 5 days, most of them on the same day, and we consistently do meet that accuracy goal. Moving on to our vital records in the clerk's office. A similar metric is used along with the Register of Deeds office. We want to ensure 99.9% accuracy when recording, and we've met that goal in 2017 while processing 27,085 records, and that includes our birth, marriages, deaths, gun permits, business registrations, and military discharges. In addition to creating new records, we've received over 52,000 requests for existing records in 2017. We processed 100% of those within 4 business days. Moving on to probably what gets the most attention from the public, and that's elections. elections is really kind of akin to air traffic controller. We work closely with local clerks who maintain our voter rolls and help to administer the election on election day. We also play a vital role as it relates to implementing the canvas, which I believe is one of those checks and balances that helps ensure the integrity and security of our election operations on election day. And we have a great board of canvassers who you all have appointed to do that work on behalf of the people, and they and Jared do a very great job canvassing the election results after that. So I like to think that our work really starts, our work on election day actually starts after election day. We do receive many voter registrations in our office each year, about 9,500 in 2017. And just the way the law is set up, while it would be more efficient for us to just process those when they come to us, the law is set up that the local unit maintains and manages those records. And so we transmit those registrations on down to the locals, and we do that within 5 business days, getting them to the clerks as soon as possible to ensure the accuracy of our voter rolls. There'll be a little more to talk about in elections later on in the presentation. We will move on to our court office, our court side division. Because of the sheer number of filings that we do process, I know you heard from Andy, who really kind of gave a great overview of the circuit court. We process a sheer amount of volume each year, and the sensitivity of those files that we handle, we look for a higher accuracy rating, or accuracy performance, and have historically striven for 99% accuracy. And in 2017, we did exceed that with 99.5% accuracy. It is rather it should be expected, but it is rather impressive given that we have handled over 340,000 files in our office last year. Additionally, the court office processed over 80,000 requests for information or copies of our files, and 100% of those requests were processed within 5 business days. I'm not sure that it's not widely known, but we do work very closely with our circuit court division, or with our circuit court over there, and the partnership is one that I think is really important to note, and how we do work together cooperatively. I can't say the same for the experience that other county clerks have in counties throughout the state, or other circuit courts experience with their county clerk's office. So to not note that, I would be remiss. It's very, very indicative of how we operate here in West Michigan, and it's something that really is important because we all work for the people. We do work with them on, we collect all fines and fees and restitutions for the circuit court, and that was in 2017, we collected almost $3.5 million. And that gets put into the budget, and really, it really is a service that we provide to be able to make victims whole, and make sure that administration of justice is done on that end as well. Moving on to significant accomplishments. I've been eligible for recall for 6 months now almost, so I think there's a big accomplishment right there. Being the new kid on the block, like I said, it has been quite a transition and quite a learning opportunity. So there are truly a lot of personal, professional accomplishments over these last 18 months. But to highlight some of them for the office, the new election equipment dominated this first year. A lot of time and energy for years went into this intensive project, and it's one that I worked on We had 123 precincts in November of 2017 use the new equipment, and the remainder will implement this next August, or this coming August. Another accomplishment is we can say goodbye to election magic and hello to election night reporting update in real time on the county website with an interactive map that that we think is going to be just a hit with not only the campaigns and candidates, but the public as well, who just wants updated information as it comes in. And it really is one of those technological advances that we were able to harness. And I can say, with the exception of counting our absentee ballots, our absentee counting boards, when we get the results, the public will get the results. And we're really excited about that. Jerry and our team in Deeds continue to make great gains in encouraging e-recording in our Register of Deeds for land records to speed up the land records recording process. We now record over 60% of our records electronically, and that saves the county and the customers time and money. That's up about 10% from last year. I think we were about 50% last year. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but when our office talks about collaborations, we certainly, our relationships with the local municipal clerks is high among those collaborations in serving the citizens as well as the election operation. With the rollout of the new equipment, we've been able to do some great things in terms of working with advocates in people with disability community to introduce their constituents to the new voting equipment through demonstrations and being available to answer questions and things like that. So we've really attempted to do some outreach in areas where we know there will be a change when they go to the polls with that equipment. Few additional collaborations of importance. The Legal Assistance Center is very useful collaboration with our court division. A lot of people, and we joke, but even some of the deputies in the court office joke about just send it to the second floor, send it to the second floor. We get a lot of traffic in our court division, and there are people who come in and they may not even know where they're supposed to go. They just know they're here. They're supposed to be in that building, and a lot of them come and are looking for legal advice, which my staff cannot provide. And so the fact that we can steer customers to the public, to the Legal Assistance Center, is very, very helpful, both for us to be able to, in some way, answer questions, provide a service, but also to them as well to get what they need. E-recording through our mortgage and title companies we did touch on. Kim and our Vitals team always enjoys attending the back-to-school community events to answer questions about getting the needed records and documents for kindergarten enrollments. We're kind of a hit because we bring candy, and the kids really like that. Moving on to potential budget issues or other issues, our office handles an amazing amount of work, and while a lot of it can be streamlined, utilizing and harnessing technology, we also are a service center where we have people come to our office in regular flow, and so that is sometimes a challenge to make sure that while the paperwork can get done, the actual human-to-human interaction, we have the staffing to accommodate for all of that. And so we will be looking at our staffing levels just to ensure that we've got the number right, and we've got the structure the way it should be as well. In a general comparison to counties throughout the state, we do have a very lean staff. As I was transitioning into this office, I was going through some old files. I've learned that we are at about 1974 staffing level, which again, because we've been able to utilize technology, is part of the operating on state-of-the-art equipment that ensures our accuracy and effectiveness. Election equipment, I just want to thank you very, very much for working with my office on those upfront funds that you provided from the CIP to get the implementation going. And looking forward there, we'll have the budget for maintenance in years 5 through 10, and also for the next purchase, whether that's 10 years down the line, 12 years down the line. I don't want to take for granted that we will have these state and federal HAVA funds like we did this last time around, so that will obviously kind of be on our minds as well. There's legislation that County Clerks Association has advocated for, and it seems to be passing through the legislature to allow for counties, the county clerks to keep the filing fees instead of refund them to the winner of these primary elections. I've been advocating if that does go into, if that does come into fruition, that those funds be reserved for updating election equipment so that we have some base structure to work from when that time comes. But we'll see if that happens. I don't know where they're at with that. I may be the only one on that ship. So looking ahead, we are in the process of upgrading or getting new software system for our land records management and our vital records management in our vital records division and our deeds office. We are working on a 2003 version today. And the version we are working with was designed to be a land records management system, but we were able to
Retrofit.
make it work in some way, shape, or form for our vitals. We're looking for something that we're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole anymore. We want something that works for the needs of our office, not making our needs in the office work with the system that we have. And we're very fortunate to have our register of deeds automation, technology automation fund to be able to ease the strain from the general fund budget to be able to do that. But 2003 system, and it is kind of a perfect timing as well as we go into getting onto Windows 10. This system can no longer support, Windows 10 cannot support the system that we're on. So that's how obsolete our system is. So that's a big project coming for next year. Also, this has been a passion of mine to ensure transparency and accountability in elections. And I've talked with a lot of you, I've listened to a lot of you as you've come to me as well. Brace yourselves, because we are hoping for 2019 implementation of campaign finance software, where you can report online and not have to walk down to my office. Although we do like to see your faces come in, but we think it's time to step into the 20th century to be able to do that. We continue to, I meant 20. We continue to put an emphasis and focus on document file retention and purging as prescribed by the law over in our court division for court case files and things like that. And we transfer, after so many years, those files that aren't permissible to be purged go to our archive center, which I would love, if any of you want to take a tour of our community archive center, I would love to host that sometime. One other issue we've got is reconfiguration of our office. That needs to be looked at. I'm looking forward to working with Al down the line. We do need to just evaluate that. There is no privacy or discretion for individuals who come to our office to discuss their records. And I think that's kind of important to look at. Our setup, our configuration sometimes is not entirely efficient for the flow of our office operations. So we'll be looking at that as well. And then finally, but not least at all,
All right.
the opportunity. There
Thank
are
you.
any questions?
Thank you so much. Any questions for the clerk, Commissioner Skaggs?
Thank you, Lisa, appreciate that. Two questions. One on the peanut gallery 20th century quote. We have a 20th century campaign finance report system at the state called MERS. Please, I beg of you, bring us into the actual 21st century, or the best of the 20th century, and something that we can work with. That's not a question. But here's an actual question. It's not for the clerk. Clerk Lyons referenced HB 4810 and its similar bills about the non-refundability of the ballot fee. I would encourage us to consider taking a position on this at some point. I think that this is a really bad idea. User fees I think are fine for parks. I think that they can work for some other aspects with registered fees, but I don't think we should make democracy a user fee-based system. And I think that the $100, I'm glad that the bill went from not raising the $100 fee, but it still kept it non-refundable. I think this is an unsalvageable bill. I think that if current law, as I understand it, is you get your refundable fee back if you get 5% of the vote, out of proof that you have some support from the community. I think we should consider taking a position on this as a legislative committee to make sure that we're not putting a financial burden on people who want to be candidates, and we're letting every citizen have a chance to make it regardless of financial situation.
May I?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you for mentioning MERS. In 2013, when campaign finance reform was done and went into effect, part of that reform required the state to provide MERS to all the counties. It's 2018 and we're still waiting on it. They say next quarter, but to be perfectly honest, I've had this conversation with Jared as well as Rob. We are not inclined to take the state up on that, which is why, frankly, because we think there's something, there may be something better out there that our county can utilize. So that's why we're looking ahead to the possibility or the probability that we may not be using the state, the state-provided software system and doing our own. As it relates to the user fees, I also appreciate you bringing that up. I was chair of the elections committee for 4 years, and that the refundable, the non-refundable filing fees has always been an issue with the Clerks Association. At that time, I never supported that for kind of the similar reasons, but my position, and I've made it clear with our association, if they are going to continue to advocate for that, and it does get traction, I do believe if we go that route, then that funding should be for the administration and upgrading of our election equipment, which for the public in that regard. So I appreciate your comments on that, and I do hope that as that legislation seems to be moving forward now that I'm not there, that will be part of that discussion, what to do with those funds.
All right.
And you have my full support on that.
All right, Commissioner Korndike.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for all your hard work, Madam Clerk. Appreciate it. A couple of quick questions regarding elections. 123 precincts have the new machines. How many precincts is that? How many?
We've got about 250 precincts.
So about
So
half.
it fluctuates just by nature of population shift and the size of the precincts, the number of precincts that they perform. But we've got about 250 in the 252 this year. So it was about half. Now I will say, remember, while that's half the precincts, it is not half of our municipalities because precinct.
Wow.
As the polls close and they close out those machines, they're transmitted through a secure cellular modem, right directly to our office.
So that is a change.
It is instantaneous. When we know, no.
Good news. And the final thing is looking at the expected voter registration. This year, last year was 10,000. We had 9. I'm a little surprised that it's that low, but do we expect more than 10,000 people to register in 2018? And how is that going? Because the number was almost 30,000 in our last election.
Now remember that number, that 9,500, that is the number of just individuals who registered to vote in the county.
Oh, okay.
So that we processed, or that we took in and,
But did you process the same 29,000 in 2016?
yes, we did, presidential year.
Okay. So it's still, even though it's a gubernatorial year, you're expecting any more than what the off year? I don't know, I just thought that number seemed a little bit low to me, so I sort of checked that.
It's hard to say.
So it's just
I
a
would have
guess.
to go back and look at what the number was in 2014, and I'd be happy to do that. Because that would probably give you a better comparison.
Sure.
Or maybe even 2010, the last time the governor's office was
Right.
open. So I can provide those.
All right, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Baldwin. Clerk Lyons, thanks for your passion for the job. It can't always be easy. Just a quick question on the filing fees. Now, because we charge $100 to get your name on the ballot, and somehow they don't get the money back, that's limiting who can run and not run. Am I not mistaken that if people don't have $100, they can do it the old-fashioned way and get signatures and go door to door and turn that in, and then there's no money? It's a convenience to someone that doesn't want to go and get the signatures, correct?
That's correct. In 2010, I did it the old-fashioned way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Steck.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I want to follow up again on the voter registration. 10,000 strikes me as being about, I don't know, is that about the same number of registered voters that we lose a year through death and moving? And is the total registration about static?
That's actually a very good question. Now, again, because of the way the law is, our county, we do not take anybody off the rolls. That is the job of the local clerks or the Secretary of State. For whatever reason, even though I get death certificates of everybody who died in this county, and I know that they're right here in our office, I can't walk over to our elections department and say, hey, so-and-so just passed on, let's get them off, let's clean up the voter roll on their behalf. It's, frankly, in my personal opinion, it's not the most efficient way the law is set up. So that's kind of an explanation to get to. I really don't know how many have dropped off, but I can get that answer for you by going to the local clerks and the Secretary of State. It won't take long either.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. Who is responsible to purge and make sure that they are cleaned up? You're saying that your department has no role in that? It's all the
We are not.
Secretary of State or the local?
We have no authority to.
Oh.
I think for the sake of efficiency, if a resident, a registered voter in Kent County has passed away in Kent County and that information has come to our office, the law prohibits me from being able to clean up that role within our office. We do, I believe, once a week or once a month, we send death records out to every municipality that have come into the county. So we do everything we can to ensure that they've got the information in terms of cleaning up the rolls as a result of deaths in Kent County. I just have no authority to back it up, check it on the back end. Whether or not they do that, that's on staff local clerk. It would be an exercise in efficiency to provide county clerks that ability as well.
But is that the Secretary of State then that ultimately is to monitor and make sure
Commissioner Bach?
Yes, thank you, Clerk, for a fine report. Appreciate it very much, and telling me what you're going to be about in the near future. My question is about the restructure of the work area, I heard you say. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how much is that going to cost, and is that going to be a major restructure rather than just adding a room or whatever?
We don't know. I kind of just opened my thought. I mean, that is as far as we have gotten, is the thought that it needs to occur, it should occur. We have not put together any plan, any proposal. We just want to have the discussion with Al and what capabilities are. Frankly, the building is not, it's not very functional in some respects. It took a long time to figure out how to get a printer in my office. So I know it won't be without challenges, and that's why I didn't just wake up and say, all right, let's start moving things here and there and everywhere. It's going to take a lot of input from our facilities team and IT team to see what the potential is, what we can do, what we can't do, why we can't do it, and then figure out what's the cost versus the benefit. Is it worth it? Are we even going to be here in 5-10 years? That discussion can't happen.
As you brought that up, it reminded me of my dad's work environment from 1950, as I think back, how it was set up there, or leave it to Cleaver days.
Yeah,
so it probably needs a redo, and I would support you in that. But just ask a question, and
yeah, I don't want to redecorate the White House or anything. I want to make sure that it's functional and it works in discretion, provides discretion as well.
Well, I think that's a good idea, and as part of our measures, I think we need that. This is our basic work, what we're doing and we're working on, but oh, by the way, we're working on technology, which you mentioned. We're working on the build-out or whatever it might be, and each department would be different, but I think, oh, by the way, this is what we're looking forward to, and the courts mentioned as well what they did with juveniles and so forth. So I think every department should have that. Oh, by the way, we're thinking about this or whatever it might be.
All right.
Comments. Thank you.
Any other questions for Clerk Lyon? I just have a couple comments. I would like us to look at space needs for every department. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it is 2018 and we all kind of operate differently. We don't need hundreds of square feet for filing cabinets, so I hope we do that. Thank you for what seemed to be a pretty easy transition into the new election equipment. That was great. Hopefully, knock on wood, August and November go well. And then 1973, I'm no spring chicken, but that was before I was born. So hopefully we can get some, updated technology to you. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to item 5, appointment of the Veteran Services Committee. Wayman?
Yes, this is a request to appoint John Baxter to the Veteran Services Committee to fill an unexpired 4-year term ending December 31, 2021. A citizen's vacancy recently occurred on the Veteran Services Committee as a result of Paul Potter's passing, as you know. The vacancy was posted on the county's website for several weeks thereafter. An interview team consisting of Commissioners Mandy Bolter, Dan Korndike, and Jim Talon reviewed applications, interviewed potential candidates, and is recommending the appointment of John Baxter to the Veteran Services Committee.
I'll move.
All right. Moved by Commissioner Skaggs, support by Commissioner Korndike. Questions or comments on this issue? Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick comment, and that is that it's so great to see we have such incredibly well-qualified people that were part of this process. And, that makes it a little tougher to decide. But that's a good thing and a good sign for the input that we'll get into the work of the council.
Yep. Great. All right. Commissioner Korndike.
Being part of the interview team, we did talk to Mr. Baxter, and he seemed like a very impressive individual, and I'm sure he'll do a very good job placing a phenomenal number of all time. Thank you.
All right. All right. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of this appointment, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Moving on to item 6, Board Commissioners' request for early childhood millage. Wayman?
Yes, this is a request to the Commissioners to authorize placement of a proposition on the November 6, 2018 general election ballot for a dedicated millage for the provision of community-based early childhood development services for children up to age 5 and expected parents. This millage subcommittee recommends to the Board of Commissioners that a dedicated millage in the amount of .25 mils and for a duration of 6 years appear on the general election ballot this November with the stipulation that the funds be administered with the same model as currently used for the senior millage and with independent oversight and measuring of performance regularly reported to the county. A 2017 gap analysis in services and funding completed by First Steps Kent found a funding gap in prevention and early intervention services, which means that more than half of children eligible for services addressing early childhood development are not receiving these services. Community partners have identified evidence-based, comprehensive services and supports that improve kindergarten readiness. The median home value in Kent County is approximately $180,000 with a median taxable value of $100,000. The median cost to Kent County taxpayers would be approximately $50 per year. The request was reviewed by administrative staff to ensure compliance with the board's millage request policy and state statute. The request was also reviewed and recommended to be placed on the November 2018 general election ballot by the millage subcommittee, which includes Stan Stack, Emily Breavy, Harold Mast, and Phil Skaggs. This item was recommended for approval by the Finance and Fiscal Resources Committee at its June 19, 2018 meeting.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Steck, support by Commissioner Vaughn. Questions or comments on this? Commissioner Coleman.
So this, as you all know, my house is full of early childhood. I really just want to give my personal appreciation to the work of the subcommittee. The materials provided were clear, well organized, all the supporting materials. I found it super helpful as I studied up on this topic. So I just want to express my appreciation to everybody involved in that, the commissioners and all staff. As you know, I've said this before, last time with the zoo and museum millage. My opinion on tax increases is really should be done in two circumstances. One is some kind of emergency where tax increase for a limited period of time to deal with that emergency is appropriate. The other is some kind of structural change to our community, to our government. So this is clearly not the first, but I've wrestled with the question of, is it the second? Is this supporting really a structural change in our community? And in some respects, I think it is. In, for instance, the increasing refugee population in Kent County, et cetera. But I continued to think through this, and I think the question to me is not whether these programs are good, whether they're demonstrated to have positive impact on the community. That to me seems very clear. I'm familiar with Family Futures and other programs that exist now, and there's a lot of great work that happens there, and clear results. So the question is not whether these are good programs that have positive benefit. The question to me is, should we be putting this to have the entire community be paying for it? And that's a tough question. Again, in some sense, I think it is a community issue. It is a benefit to us all as children get a good start in life. On the other hand, I couldn't help but think back to this letter we received from what's her name, Joanne Thompson, a 74-year-old widow in our community who's extremely concerned about the burden of additional tax on her with a fixed and limited income. So while personally a lot of these programs are really fantastic, some of my children have benefited. I now have a child with cerebral palsy who's benefiting from programs and that fit in this area. So the question to me is, should the burden of that cost, for my family's kids, for other families' kids, be put on people like Joanne in our community that would really struggle with it. And at the end of the day, I don't think so. And so, because I'm in doubt about clarity, I'm going to be voting no on this today.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Any other comments or questions, concerns anyone wants to share? Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Skaggs is a history teacher here. I guess I tend to be the historian because I go back so far, so I hope you'll indulge me and let me recount a little history. I started out connecting with kids as an elementary teacher when I came out of college, taught first, second, and third grade, and then became the assistant director of Baxter Community Center, where I was for 15 years and helped oversee a child care center that served 90 kids, many of them from low-income families, and saw firsthand the importance of that early childhood work and support. We also, while I was there at Baxter, started up a health clinic for families, primarily serving families with children, because it was such a need and it was so important to the development of those kids. I started on the Board of Commissioners in '93, and in 1995 I was fortunate to be part of the Our Children, Our Future initiative, which those community standards for kids were adopted by this county commission in 1995. And you can see those online. I was privileged near the end of my first 8 years on the board to be part of the prevention subcommittee, which took a look at just all that concrete evidence about the importance of services in early childhood, and was very glad to see, after I went off the board, Commissioner Korndike replaced me back then, the county commission chose to take tax dollars, $1.5 million tax dollars, and invest it in early childhood services in this community. Fast forward to when I came back on the commission in 2009, we were having difficult financial times in this community. Those dollars for early childhood services got ratcheted back. It wasn't services that we were required to provide. It was one of those areas that we ratcheted back, and we keep hearing this number of 700-some thousand that we're currently investing. What I really struggle with, and as Commissioner Coleman said, the evidence is there about how effective these programs are. This board chose to put before the voters, to ask the voters what they thought and whether they would support 0.5 mils for senior services. And that was approved. We asked the community, would you support 0.44 mils for museum services? And I struggle to understand why we wouldn't ask the community whether they would support similar taxes for these critical early childhood services. So I'm very supportive. I wish that we could see our way to provide what we have heard is adequate funding to really have an impact in this community, because we know there's certain services that you have to do to get this thing going in order to provide some of those other services. So very supportive, and wish we could support it at a higher level than is being proposed.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Talon. Commissioner Womack.
Yes, I also agree with Commissioner Talon that I would have rather saw it at 3.5, because I would like to make sure they have a budget that's not going to restrict them straight out of the gate to accomplish their outcomes. And from seeing early childhood programs since I was younger, money being put in, money being taken back during hard times and financial crisis throughout our state, it's good to see that we have another early childhood program coming to be. But like Mr. Talon said, it would be great to see it at 3.5 and let the community judge if they think it's going to be enough. One of the reasons I do support it, because like I said, growing up here, I've seen early childhood programs come and go. But one of the reasons I did support this, looking into it, seeing the caliber of people who are on the board, the caliber of people who are partners in this situation with this early childhood initiative, I think this is a group that can get the job done. I would be amiss not to speak up for my district where there's an issue of reading disparities between minorities and their majority counterparts. I think that's a real important issue that should be brought to the forefront and should be on those lists of issues. We've been trying to combat that for a lifetime, but we can't give up on that because I hear a lot of people in my community when they feel that they're impoverished. I hear the different solutions all the way from voting to things that I don't understand why people would bring up revolution. But that's how desperate people are to want to change their lives when it comes to economic freedom here in America. But I know that one of the only reasons I was able to come out of poverty myself was through education, through knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and developing talents, and keeping up with today's technology. So I definitely support this, and I just want to say that it's very important that we do try to lower that gap between these reading disparities because this education is something that's going to lower our prison systems, our school-to-prison pipeline. I just want the people that's working on it to know how important their job is, and it's definitely something I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I will start off by saying that making it, I think, clear what we're actually doing here. We are voting to send to the full board a recommendation that puts this millage request on the ballot. We're not raising anybody's taxes. This is the only way that that the community can let its priorities and its willingness to pay for those priorities be done solely through going through a ballot proposal. This body and the full board simply can't do that. We are simply allowing the voters to have a chance to tell us what their priorities are. And so I think that we should allow them to do that at a rate that is being recommended to us. In fact, I would say, given what I have seen so far, that we should consider doing what Commissioner Ponstein mentioned as the old-fashioned style, and perhaps come up with a way in which this body can be worked around, and letting organizations go straight to the voters by petition and to put it on the ballot. I don't know if that's state law or local ordinance. I'd certainly like to find out. But it seems to me that that there have been an argument to save the voters from themselves, and I would like to allow the voters to have a full say. So let me start. That was not the start, that was the preamble. Let me start by saying where most of us agree, and that's the subcommittee report, which I did not vote for, but solely did not vote for based on the rate. I think there are at least three arguments in here that are fairly clear. One, which we've already heard, is the incredible return on investment. So about 6 lines up from the top, the proposed millage will very likely result in a significant short and long-term savings in the current cost of public services in areas such as healthcare, education, workforce participation, criminal justice, and law enforcement. You go down a little bit more, and again, based on all this data, right, this is my binder, it's gotten huge. Based on all this data, we know we've got a $3 to $13 return on investment here. So let's do some investing, I would say. But this was the first thing that we could agree on, and we saw that in Bright Beginnings. And just to mention again where we're going to see this savings in reducing referrals to Child Protective Services, incarceration rates, reliance on public assistance, and improving educational outcomes and ultimately workforce readiness. And we've got big changes coming, not just kindergarten readiness, but we've got the new state-mandated third grade level reading requirements that are coming up, which, having talked with teachers and administrators in my school districts, is going to take a lot to implement. And we really need to do right by our kids and make sure that they are ready to not be held back in third grade, but to be successful at that level. And again, based on all of this subcommittee work and reams of data that scholars have done, we know that this period of 0 to 3 is critical in making sure that everyone in this community has an opportunity to be ready for that kindergarten grade, ready for that kindergarten test, and ready to be successful in reading at the right time. The other reason, or I should say, the other thing that I think we agree on, or at least we agree on as a subcommittee, was that this was not an ISD function. The ISD is concerned with K through 12. This millage is concerned with 0 through 3. And the report states that oversight of dedicated millage revenue should be placed at the county level. Because in large part what we're talking about here is public health. Making sure these kids are healthy enough to be able to learn and to have the brain development necessary to do so, which is a clear function of county government. The third issue that was discussed, and I think there was some robust conversations on it, was the issue of whether this should be a state and federal funded program or a county funded program. I think that, as we know, Commissioner Steck is an attorney and is a fantastic wordsmith, but I think that what we said here is that all levels of government should have this under their purview. Now, I've heard several reasons for no. One was, why don't this switch over to the ISD? I think we've got the answer on that in a memo from First Steps. And again, the ISD is required to work on K through 12, and this is not what we're doing. Two, on the state funding, I would say that it does not make sense for Kent County, that wants to be a leader in this country, a leader in this region, a leader in this state, to wait for what is essentially a dysfunctional state government to come help us out. I know that there was, at the Econ Club maybe a decade ago, someone came in and said, unfortunately you can't secede from the state of Michigan because it's a basket case. But what you can do is tie yourself to Chicago. I think we need to do what we can do for ourselves in local governments in this county. If we wait forever for the state, we're going to do wrong by the kids that are being born now and into the future. If the state does come forward, it's likely to be about expanding preschool to fourth graders, which would be a lot of money, which would be extraordinarily helpful. Then the baton goes from 0 to 3 to the state to the school districts. Let's hope that that's what works out. But I think that we'd wait forever for state funding for these sorts of programs that we're talking about. The third reason to vote no that I've heard is about millage fatigue. Again, I'm not sure that it's up for us to decide about millage fatigue. I think it's up for the voters to decide. I think if you look at the recent election results, there's certainly no indication that there is voter fatigue. Our own staff in their background materials has told us that we have the 15th lowest overall millage rate of the 83 counties in Michigan. I would suspect that amongst the 10 largest, we're probably last in our overall millage rate. Some of that we can be fairly proud of, I think. But what I think that it states is that there is room, should the voters decide that this is something that they want to approve, that there is certainly room in budgets to do so. Now, moving on to the rate. I have to say that it is my opinion that slashing this rate in half was done purely for political reasons, which is disappointing. I don't believe that I heard a single policy argument or reason for the cut. I didn't hear that, oh, this program on page 7 probably is not as effective. What I heard was this is the only way that we can get the votes. But we're going to find out if that's the case. I think that in the memo that we should all have from June 7 from First Steps about why 0.35 is a rate that they can live with. That's a cut down from 0.5, but a reasonable rate that will allow them to do the most effective services at around $4 million a year, as opposed to what cutting it to 0.25 would do only $2 million a year. So I'm concerned that at 0.25, we are doing wrong by our kids. We are not taking the bold steps necessary to be successful into the future, to do what's right by our kids and to do what's right by our whole entire community by having a ready workforce. I think we can bring in the right place, and they will tell you that workforce talent is the reason people will move to Kent County in the future. With that, I think that this vote is really a statement of where our values are, but really a statement of, are we going to give the community a chance to vote on the proposal that First Steps has brought us to make a statement about their values? So with that, I move to amend the motion to increase the rate to the level of 0.35.
All right, we have a motion. Support motion by Commissioner Skaggs, support by Commissioner Womack to amend the action request from a 0.25 to a 0.35. Okay. Is there any questions, comments, discussion on that issue? On the amendment. Commissioner Talon? No?
Over here.
Sorry.
Commissioner Steck?
Thank you. First, a point of clarification, if I might. If the Legislative Human Resource Committee were to amend this proposal to a 0.35 after the Finance Committee has approved it at a 0.25, does it go back to the Finance Committee for consideration again, this time on a 0.35 level? Does it go directly to the full board? What happens to it?
Our standing rules basically are set up like a series of dominoes. It is first to the Finance Committee, Finance recommends to LHR, LHR recommends to the board. The rules are silent on the need to go back to Finance if there is an amendment at either LHR or the board. So from the base of our rules as written, it would continue to go forward as amended.
To the full board. To the full board.
Right.
Okay. Well, so let me comment a little bit, and I apologize to Commissioner Skaggs if you didn't hear any of the rationale for why a 0.25 was considered by the subcommittee, other than the political expediency, as he suggests. Obviously, I support it, and I'll address my support for the proposal when we get out of the motion to amend. But I did believe that there is a substantive reason for why the committee chose to go with a 0.25 instead of a 0.5 or 0.35, as was also attempted at the subcommittee. And it has to do with the consideration of a number of factors, substantive factors, including the fact that a number of the members of the committee felt that there continues to be an obligation and interest in varying degrees at the state and the federal level to also address some of these key issues. And so in a effort in which this is clearly a new move, it is a bold move by this county to consider moving into addressing the gap as defined. There is also conversation at those levels, and the thinking being that over the course of the projected time period, there would be a potential change in those funding dynamics and those efforts, and so reserving the ability to see what happens there was one of the reasons for the caution. The second is that we also see that at the county level, we will be facing a number of other demands over the near future. I don't know exactly what they're going to look like, but there will be likely additional policy demands that will call upon us to do something similar, to submit this to the voters, to again balance what is the need compared to what's the capacity to pay taxes. So a lesser amount was thought to be indicated as a consequence of that. And the third is, this is a bold new move, and we all believe that the evidence is supportive, that there are reasons to believe that this can have a significant change in some of the directions of how we deal with these issues and the costs on what it takes to deal with these issues. At the same time, it is a relatively new level of participation and activity by the county. And so trust and verify, which is something I believe is a critical component of this, would suggest that we're not closing the gap anyway with this program. The gap is a $99 million to a $200 million challenge. So whether it's at 0.5 or whether it's at 0.25 is not going to close the gap. But it is going to demonstrate our capacity to effectively deal with the gap. So taking it in a stepped version by way of a 0.25, see what it looks like, see what it generates by way of savings, see what kind of results it generates, and then come back and go to the voters again if in fact it demonstrates the value that we think it will, and if in fact that the state has not stepped to the plate as we had hoped they would, makes more sense. So stepping it back at 0.25 is not intended to send the wrong message that we're not interested in the program. It is to suggest that we are interested in the program, that we do want to see this attempted. We do want to see what it produces by way of results before we go to the next step. So those are the justifications for why the subcommittee put a 0.25 instead of a 0.35 or 0.5.
All right, any other comments on the amendment? Just the amendment. Commissioner Womack.
When we talk about closing the gap, as I see it, either we're going to do this or we're not going to do it. And if we're going to do it, I just don't believe that we should be limiting them to 2.5. I support the 3.5 mainly because I've seen so many millages have come through here and they embellish. And I read the newspaper and they say it's a crisis. And they say, we're going to stop this service and we're going to do that. And the people jump up and they say, okay, we're going to support it. And a lot of those millages that have been embellished have been supported by this commission. They've been supported by boards who are connected to those who have those millages coming through. We had one millage where we even had people not associated with this board, of course, because we got some outstanding people on this board. And whenever they speak, even when we disagree, I know they're coming from their heart. I know they're coming from their educated opinions. So my opinion is just one of our commissioners. So there were things that came on one millage. Like I said, it didn't come from any of our fine commissioners. I stand by every one of them. When it comes to their credibility. But there were things in my neighborhood where they were saying to vote against a millage was racist because these services were going to be stripped from the African-American community. That's an embellishment. That was an outright lie. African-Americans who didn't support the millage were called sellouts and Uncle Toms. And one of my favorite commissioners today said there should only be a millage if there's a crisis. There is an educational crisis in Grand Rapids, in Kentwood. There is an educational crisis in Kent County. There's an educational crisis in America. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this educational crisis. I know it off the top of my head. African-American females outnumber African-American males 20-1 on college campuses. If that's not a crisis, we have kids in intermediate camps right now who are being separated from their mothers and fathers. Some will make it back, and I'm not here to take a political side on that. Some will make it back to their parents, but some of them are going to end up in Kent County. So we have English learners that are going to need help making sure that tomorrow they can be productive citizens in Kent County, that no matter what their beginning was, running from one country to another, that they are human beings. And if we bring them here, it takes a village to raise a child. They're all our children, no matter what color, whether you grew up on the poor white side of town or you're a white child that has maybe alcoholic parents that don't care about your education, where you're African-American child, where your family's working in factories or somewhere and don't have time to tutor you after school. We have an educational crisis. If you walk through the jails here, and that's not taking nothing from our fine sheriff department. I'm glad their millage went through because they cared about that whether you're here for a crime or not, we have to keep human dignity and decency to a certain level, and it takes money to have you a facility to help rehabilitate you. So that was a millage that I did support. But when you walk through the jails or you're a commissioner and you get a letter from the jail and every other word is spelled wrong. Not only are the words spelled wrong, the way they're using English is totally like they could not write a resume. I can't believe that our county doesn't understand we have an educational crisis, and that educational crisis leads to all these other things in life, from incarceration to a lifetime on welfare to people who can't write a resume, but they could think of 100 different ways to go to DHS and get new money, to child protective services. We have an educational crisis, and we have a chance, as Commissioner Steck said, that gap is so wide we may not ever close the whole gap. But we have to do the best of closing that gap, because if we don't close that gap, every other gap goes further and further until the point, like I said before, people who have not had the correct education a lot of times find themselves in positions where they have no choice but to blame other people. And that's why they feel so comfortable to go out sometimes and hurt other people, or feel they have a right to steal or take from other people, or any mirages of things I hear in meetings on how you can come out of oppression and poverty. I'm going to keep it short and end right there and just say that I just want the commission to know, in my opinion, this is one of the most important millages that we have brought here. I haven't spoke out on any millages. I haven't spoken against any millages. But I've seen a lot of embellishments about crisis. This is a true crisis. We have educational crisis. I hope we take the opportunity to up it to 3.5. We should have gave them the 4.5. If we don't think that it's gonna make a difference, then maybe we should be more involved with those asking for the millage to help them and guide and make sure it makes a difference. And we should let the people decide, but I am totally in support to raising it to 3.5 and letting this community know, this city, this county, every township, that we do have an educational crisis.
All right, any other comments on the .35 amendment? Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reflection on a couple of points. One is, again, remembering that we began the prevention initiative 16 years ago. The amount of funding for that has gone down. We have not gotten federal and state participation for these last 16 years, and I am not optimistic, perhaps unlike some of my colleagues, that that's going to change over the next 6 years. I can be hopeful, but maybe it's just because I'm an old guy and I haven't seen it in these 16 years. Second thing is, I'm very concerned about whether this initiative will be able to demonstrate its ability to provide value. I think we heard back from First Steps that at the .25 rate, it's going to be difficult to do that. There are certain basic foundational pieces to this, including evaluation, including some of the infrastructure that needs to be put in to identify developmental delays and so on. They have said to us that in order to be able to do this work well and be able to demonstrate that value, the .35 is a minimum to do that. And I think we need to take that into account as we vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions or concerns, Commissioner Skaggs?
So just 2 quick points. One, I think on the issue of verification, we have all the verification that I think we need. We are special people here in Kent County and frequently tell ourselves that. But our kids' brains are made the same way as other kids' brains in other countries and in other states and in other counties. This is going to work. Let's give them the funds necessary so that when we come back at this in 6 years, that we can see actual progress here. If we slash this in half, and it's not, I'm accepting much of what, well, let's not say I'm accepting it, but I'm hearing much of what Commissioner Steck is saying. And it's not the first time I heard that. And that is why I'm making a request for .35 and not for .5, which would be my preference. But it's the reason that I think we should move to .35 is I think that it is a reasonable amount, the minimum amount that they've told us that they can show success. And it's not that I am not hearing these concerns about, well, maybe the state will come in, or maybe there are future millages coming. I'm concerned about the now. And the now is, in the next 6 years, is that it's unlikely that we're going to see state funding, as Commissioner Talent said. And let's give them every chance to succeed here. It was the cutting it in half, it was the number that to me seemed arbitrary, and not the decision to cut it, which I will unfortunately have to acquiesce to.
All right, any other comments, Commissioner Steck?
Question, if it is not amended here, is the motion subject to amendment at the full board?
Yes.
Any other comments on the .35 amendment?
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Vaughn. Motion to have a roll call on the amended amendment?
You don't need a motion.
Okay. All right, so all in favor of,
Nope. Have Pam call the roll.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Baumann?
No.
Commissioner Korndike?
No.
Commissioner Ponstein?
No.
Commissioner Skaggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Steck?
No.
Commissioner Talon?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonk?
No.
Commissioner Womack?
Yes.
3 yes and 6 no. Motion failed.
All right.
Chair Bolter?
No. All right, so we're back to the original request of .25. We've got a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Commissioner Steck?
So, in the last 2 weeks, the question that I have been asked most often has been, what's going on at the LRE? But a close second has been a question something like, why would a fiscal conservative support this proposal? Well, I do support it, and I support it in part because I think that there is convincing evidence that the current safety net that we all support still allows significant numbers of our children to fall through the cracks. Support it in part because I think despite the fact that we have spent significant dollars in our existing systems and service, we unfortunately still have a long way to go in our education and reading performance levels. We are down to, what, near the bottom in our 3rd grade reading, notwithstanding all of the money that we put into our existing systems. And we've learned that recently our workforce isn't up to snuff. And when it comes to the national search entities that measure the quantity and capability of our workforce, it's not capable yet. Though we don't get all of the companies coming in here we might otherwise get. However, I am sensitive to the questions that Commissioner Coleman raises. Why would we want to get into this? Should we even get into the responsibility of taking care of these children and doing this kind of program? Well, I think, frankly, as a society, we are already all in. When you consider how much money this county, the taxpayers of this county, contribute to educate our children to the point of being capable, contributing members of our community. I think we have about 170,000 students between K and 12th grade in Kent County. Maybe 150,000 of them are in the public system. I don't know what the exact breakout is. Department of Ed says that it costs $12,509 on average to educate each one of those kids per year. That tells me that the Kent County taxpayers already are all in to the tune of more than $1 billion a year. When we look at what we spend for health for health services, Medicaid, Healthy Michigan, and other support services, in this county, it has to be close to $1 billion. Already, the taxpayers are all in at that kind of number. What does it cost for us to provide policing agencies, court systems, judges? I think it's $100,000 per year per officer is the recommended or indicated cost. We have probably 1,200 officers in this county. We are all in already as the taxpayers. And the trajectory that I see going forward is we will continue to spend more and more and more taxpayer money to continue to do the same thing we do in education, healthcare, policing, court systems, criminal justice. It says that we will have about a 4.7 increase per year in health costs. At those numbers, that's $50 million more pressure on taxpayers just in that. Maybe a 1 or 2% increase in education, that's another $25 million a year. What are the cost increases for policing agencies, for courts? Significant. So when I hear that question about should we be doing this, and is it really this responsibility to deal with these issues, I say we're already entirely in. And the trajectory of where we're heading as taxpayers is substantial increases every year in what it's going to cost. So does this show us an opportunity to change that trajectory? And that's what I'm most moved by this. There is evidence to indicate, documented evidence to indicate that we can see as much as $3 return on every dollar invested. Maybe as much as $13, depending upon the studies you look at. And these are not just national studies, though there are national studies. Some of these studies come out of Kent County's experience. Now, the studies are relatively old, and so I have said that I think that we need to look carefully at how this impacts the current environment. But I'm convinced that as I look around, what would be a reasonable investment? Somebody that tells me that I can get an investment of between 300% and 1,300% return, but I'm happy if I get 6, 7, 8% out of my portfolio, that's a pretty phenomenal rate of return. Will it actually be there? I don't know. But the kind of promises that this suggests is the kind of promise that I don't think a reasonable taxpayer can pass up. It's an opportunity to have a radical change and redirection on how we address these situations. Instead of the projections that I see of more with less results, this suggests better results at less cost. That's why I think it's important to give the taxpayers the opportunity to do this, and that's why I support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ponstein?
Thank you, Chair Bolter. Well, there's been a lot said in the past 45 minutes. I heard Commissioner Skaggs said that state is dysfunctional, but that's an understatement. They've been dysfunctional for a long time. They're always driven by crises. What they are good at is shrugging their responsibility and putting it onto county, schools, and cities. You only have to look to indigent defense. Are they going to fully fund that? No. You have to look at the courts they gave us. Are they fully funding that? No. revenue sharing, are they fully funding that? No. So promises have been made, promises have been kept. I heard the word educational crisis. I've heard that word when I was elected in 1980 to the Granville School Board. Everything's a crisis. And that's how we fear the taxpayer into giving more money. Schools were told that the lottery was going to be this windfall for schools. What they found out is for every dollar that the lottery raises, the state took away $1. The schools had to sue the state, and Durant won for special education mandates. They won that. They sued again in Durant 2. We got Prop A that was supposed to level the playing field for all funding for all schools. That never happened. There's still substantial gaps between poor districts and rich districts. We have a special ed millage in this community. We have a school enhancement millage in this committee. We keep throwing money at the problem. Is it needed? Yeah, you could argue it, but I probably got 20 other things that I could argue the exact same thing is that money's needed there. The whole system is broke, from conception to death. How we educate, how we treat people in this lifelong learning journey is just wrong. By throwing more money on it is not going to correct that. I've heard all of you agree that we're not going to be able to count on the state for the money. I mean, that's ridiculous. They will spend billions and billions of dollars to attract businesses to the state, and then those same businesses then say, well, we don't have an educated workforce. We don't have a skilled workforce. Well, maybe if we would have taken some of the billions that they shed to them and brought it to this level, maybe we wouldn't have to go back to the taxpayer again and again and again. And there is a difference between taxpayers in this county. And the way millages are set up and they are run, the person that's living in the northern part of my district that's on a limited income doesn't know if they're going to be able to put food on the table, doesn't know how they're going to pay their health insurance bill. That $80 means a lot, but it's the $80 that's tacked on to every single targeted millage that's been put down them. They do not have the voting block to pass millages. That's the thing with millages, is that there's a certain voting block that's always going to get it. Those that can afford to pay that tax. And what it leaves behind are the ones that can't afford. And their situation in life isn't getting better, it's getting more difficult. So, like the zoo millages and the other millages, I am against this. Going to the taxpayer time and time again is not the answers. Taxpayers pay it too much money. We have the wrong priorities, and that's something that isn't being addressed. And by passing another enhancement millage, we'll just set the groundwork for another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Our priorities are wrong when it comes on how we educate and train our citizens of this state.
All right. Commissioner Womack, did you want to speak another time?
Yes. It just seems that a lot of people are happy with the way things are because they may have never found themselves on the other side of the fence. You know, when I think of a 12-year-old that came up with this poem, 12 years old, the world's concerned with an endangered whale, an eagle that can't fly, a ship that can't sail. But what about mama's baby? They don't educate me. They alienate me. That's 12-year-old kids coming up who put into a poem, they don't educate me, they alienate me. So to be at 12 years old and already know I need this education, to see that we said we give $12,000 a year to a student, but at the same time, we all know we give $30,000 a year or more to hold somebody in prison. We become so comfortable with saying we give these kids $12,000, and it's really $7,500 depending on what taxable area that you live in. When Amazon tells us you need a more educated workforce, to me that's more proof of how important education is and how we are not invested in education enough. the money that we're spending right now, putting children in camps, that if we were going to put them in camps, we could have just found everybody at the border and said, go back home, go free. But we got the money to put you in camps, and we got the money to pay nonprofits to build more camps for children. We all ran on jobs, education, safe streets. Today, I just have to say, we have things like the Silver Line where we spent like 26 million, maybe not as a county, but the different sources. And ever since we built the Silver Line, we've had more traffic jams on our highways. We got more traffic jams up Division Avenue. We got people in that area who talk about it. We got businesses along that area who didn't get more traffic because traffic only has one lane now. We got businesses going out of business along that area. But we never had this type of conflicted conversations about any millage until it came to education. And I'm going to quit raising my hand speaking, but I just feel so strong about education and the fact that not only are we shortchanging education, we're not giving the public a chance to decide on what this group asked for. They asked to bring this, and not only did we cut it, we cut it down to a level that once we give them this little money, we're still going to want the same outcomes, and then we're going to be saying, no, you didn't deliver these outcomes. So I really feel bad for the group because the burden upon them now is so high. And if it passes, they still have to come up with those outcomes.
All right, Commissioner Coleman.
Try to be brief here. I just wanted to comment on a few additional things. One, I appreciate everybody's thoughts on this. Some of the arguments are very persuasive. I think in some of the passions, specifically Commissioner Womack, I think is very persuasive. I do think in the past we have had conflicted conversations about millages and taxes, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we're assessing our best methods to invest, our best investments to make. I think that's a very positive thing. And I would like to just touch on the let the voters decide kind of argument. I would support Commissioner Skaggs' suggestion that voters do have a method to go straight to the ballot. I think that's a great idea. I think that the process we have now, this deliberation here, does have a purpose, and the purpose is the data, if I recall correctly, suggested 71% support for this millage by the general public, and 29% would be against. And I think one of the things that is a burden on me is considering people like Joanne that really would be increase their burden when they're already struggling to take her fixed income, to keep herself in her home. I think of a guy I know in my district. He's just north of 72nd Street. He has really struggled with the increasing property values down in Byron Center because a few years back he was in a car accident and is now mentally incapacitated to the point he can't work. His only income source is fixed. So I really feel a sense of, as we do have these conflicted considerations, that we really remember those folks, because most of us can't afford $80 a year to support good things like this. So the let the voters decide argument, I think that'd be good to have a method for groups to go straight to the ballot. But as we do have this process, I think our job is to consider Joanne and my neighbor and others who may not have a strong voice on these kind of things and may suffer the most from the cost burden. I'd also just like to point out what I think is clear is that investment in programs like this can be accomplished in other ways other than taxes, other than millages on people's property. And that, I think, is something that I would wish to be considered indeed this doesn't get approved by the voters, that some of these programs do get extended through other sources of funding. And then lastly, I'll just comment on the 1,300% argument. I think it was between $3 and $13 per dollar invested. Not to give advice on how to get this passed, but I think these programs really stand on their own merits, and that argument makes people suspicious. At least a lot of people I know, because you extrapolate and say, well, why not invest $80 million a year? We'd have $1 billion in benefit every year to Kent County. So I think the programs and the benefits stand on their own, and that argument is a stretch that might dissuade people against this and against trying this.
All right, Commissioner Steck.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman, I guess I see it just the opposite way. Because I do appreciate the frustration that Commissioner Ponstein articulates. Because the fact is that our taxpayers in this county pay an incredible amount of money every year to address how are we going to take care of our youth, how are we going to train them, how are we going to get them ready to be adults. As I said before, we spend billions of dollars. And what's the future that we have to promise to Joanne or whoever else is out there as a taxpayer, as you described? The future that we are giving them right now is incredibly costly systems that will cost us more next year and the year after that and the year after that. Business as usual will mandate we have to put in probably another $75 million every year just to keep the same level of what we have now. $75 million, probably more, but at least $75 million. That's just to keep what we're doing. That's business as usual. That's what we're offering them. That's their future. Or if you think this is a game changer, if you think this provides an opportunity to shift the gear, to be able to look at some of these challenges and say, you know what, there may be a better way of doing that. Yes, it will cost us a little money now, but if the payback, just look at the financial payback, is that the future you can offer these taxpayers is reducing the taxing pressure. 3%, 10%, 100%, 300%, 1,300%, I don't know what the number is. But any return that begins to suggest that we can curb where we're otherwise heading, change that trajectory, is an opportunity I think it's worth offering to them. So I don't look at this as a perspective that says, look, can our taxpayers afford $50 a year? I look at it from the perspective that says our taxpayers are going to be asked to pay substantially more than that next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. Maybe the taxes will come incrementally in intervals, but the cost of these services will continue to go if we don't change the direction. So is this going to generate that kind of return? I don't know. All the evidence suggests that it will generate significant return by investing dollars now and changing that trajectory later. I'm intrigued with the idea of let's put in $3 billion because then we can save enough money we could write a check to everybody, right? Well, obviously, I mean, there's a point in which the issue that we're dealing with here will have a point where it'll level off, and I don't know where that is. I'm sure it's below 2.5. So I'm comfortable, and that's why I'm comfortable recommending it. I'm comfortable that we will see significant returns. And what you can tell, Joanne, or whoever else is in your district, why would you do this? It is because I believe we need to change the trajectory. If we don't do something radical to change that, we're going to be in a disastrous situation. Where is health care costs going? 1/3 of our overall budget at the federal level? And that's not changing unless we change how we do business. So I guess I'm reiterating, I'm convinced this is an opportunity to change how we do business. Business as usual is not acceptable to me. It's worth a challenge.
Any other comments? Commissioner Skaggs.
So it appears from the votes at Finance Committee and some of the statements from some of the commissioners here today, other people are going to vote, that the majority party does not have enough votes to pass this in 125. In order for this to pass, it's going to have to be based, I think, on a principled, reasonable bipartisan compromise, which we tried to do with our amendment. I am going to vote yes on this at 0.25. I do not want to vote yes on this at 0.25 because I think that we are not giving them the funds that they need to show success down the road. But I will move this to get forward, to get it out of this committee. I want to urge Republican leadership, this committee, Finance Committee, and of the whole board to come to us and let us find a way to get to 10 votes. Let us find a way to get to 13 votes at a bipartisan compromise that can work for everyone.
All right, we've had a lot of discussion on this. I think everyone's had a chance to talk. We're going to have more discussion at full board. I just have a couple, I'll keep it brief, comments. This is why I love serving with all of you. We're all so passionate. We care about our community. We love our community. We love our districts. We are so thankful for the people who brought this forward because obviously they care. There is no doubt the work that everyone is doing. You know, again, I've said it several times, I don't come from this county, and it is just, I'm so thankful and so impressed with everything that we have and all our resources and the commitment to each other. So I think that this should be a proud moment, though it was long and many of us have to take a bathroom break, but we all are here for the right reasons. And so I want to say that I am not going to be supporting this. A couple quick reasons. I am concerned about the outcomes. I did read the report. I am almost frustrated that we spend so much money, especially on education. You know, I'm raising 2 boys. I want our reading levels better than they are. They should be better than they are, and we should demand that they're better than they are. We should demand this for everything that we spend taxpayer dollars on. So I am concerned that we're not going to get the outcomes. We're not going to be able to measure the outcomes because the group is telling us they're not going to be able to do that. That's concerning to me. A lot of this money is going to go for home visits. We have agencies that are already providing that service. Some of them have been doing this work for a generation of kids, yet they still don't have the outcomes-based data that some of us are hopeful on. Reading, you know, kindergarten readiness, reading level, graduation rates, all those things that we need to make sure we're measuring. I hope when and if this moves forward that the committee that comes together really looks at that, because a lot of state programs don't do any measurements. They just throw money at it, or we create another program. And you know, I have 17 millages in my township alone. So I'm trying to do a balancing act with serving everyone. It's not that I don't appreciate everything that the subcommittee did or the committee members. We all care about this community, and I think many people who may not support it, it's not because we don't care about kids or we don't think that some of these programs are valuable. They are valuable. We do fund them with existing tax dollars. And I think that we just have to do a balancing act of serving everyone. So with that, all in favor of this motion? We have a motion and a second.
I move for a roll call vote.
Okay.
Or
Moved by Commissioner Skaggs, support by Commissioner Womack. Pam, call the roll.
Commissioner Baumann?
No.
Commissioner Thorndike?
Yes.
Commissioner Constein?
No.
Commissioner Skaggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Steck?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonk?
Yes.
Commissioner Womack?
yes.
Chair Bolter?
No.
Commissioner Talon?
Yes.
6 yes, 3 no, motion passes.
All right. Thank you for that spirited debate. On to item 7, miscellaneous. Is there any? Commissioner Bonstein?
Well, because I'm assuming Thursday's meeting is going to be a lot longer than this one, so I wanted to get these comments in quick. Plus, I'm dealing with some family issues right now. So Whether I'll be at that meeting or not is still up in the air. But, I was at the MAC Board of Directors meeting, last county commission meeting, that's why I wasn't here. One highlight I wanted to make is that you're going to be getting probably stuff in the mail in the near future. MAC has rewritten their bylaws. A lot of it's just clean up language. I was told that the document's now shorter than the previous, which they need to be. But one of the big changes is that we're going to be redoing how the MAC Board of Directors are elected and the membership. Big things are, we're going to expand memberships to organizations that are county-related, but outside MAC Board of Directors. To be taking room for one of those seats, we're going to be eliminating one of the at-large memberships on the MAC Board of County Commissioners. I hold one of those 3 seats. The way it's set up, mine's not in jeopardy. We've also changed, we've added a term, three-year terms for the MAC Board of Directors. That may be changed when we relook at it this year, but I just wanted you to make aware of those big changes. I think expanding the MAC Board to include other county associations is a good thing. We need a lot of people at the table because once again, Lansing's not listening to us, especially a lot of our state legislators. There are some warriors for counties and cities, but they're very few. And the priorities at the state are not the same as what we have here locally.
Thank you for all your service on the MAC board, Commissioner Ponstein. Commissioner Steck.
Thank you, Chair. I note on the agenda for Thursday is also the proposal from the Lakeshore Regional Entity for the ISF auxiliary funding structure and agreement. We gave a fairly lengthy presentation to the Finance Committee on some of the background and structures of that. Did not do that to this committee, so I simply invite any of you that have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to fill you in, share my my flow chart, and give you what information I can.
And I would suggest that anyone that does have questions for Commissioner Steck on that issue, because of Thursday's long agenda, please get those answered. That would be great.
Do what I can.
Any other miscellaneous today? Commissioner Womack.
I just want to thank all the commissioners for their comments today, as we all had different opinions, but I think everybody expressed themselves and showed that they put much study into what they were talking about. And I just want to let everybody know that I definitely respect everyone at this table, and I'm proud to be a part of this Board of Commissioners.
All right. Anything else? Seeing none, we are adjourned. We need to get this thing figured out.
I'm going to call out.
Yeah, would you? Okay.
That's probably one of the most, for about 2 seconds.